Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, the discovery of biolabs in Ukraine triggered an explosive response from the media and politicians who scrambled to label it a far-right conspiracy theory, of course. However, as undeniable evidence has emerged proving the existence of these labs, a much larger and darker plot has come to light with the Pentagon right at the center. Could this be the real reason for the frantic cover-up? We're going to take a deep dive into all this and more on today's show. A few quick updates for you, though. Follow me on social media. I'm now officially on Truth Social, finally, as Man in America. And I'm also on Telegram, as usual, as well, which I'm not going to abandon Telegram, I promise you, on both places as Man in America. Make sure you're following me on there because you never know if I'm going to get canceled. I have a feeling even the whole Russia narrative is going to be the new thing they're canceling folks for. So make sure you're following me on Telegram and Truth Social. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, make sure you go subscribe on Rumble because I think my days might be limited there. And look, with the inflation and a lot of instability in the markets, folks are looking for ways to protect their wealth. And I've always been one to recommend physical gold and silver. In the past year, a lot of you have asked me if I had any recommendations as to where to buy gold or silver. And honestly, I was hesitant to recommend anyone before because unfortunately, there's a lot of shady dealers. However, after doing extensive research, I'm confident in recommending Noble Gold. You can buy gold and silver directly, or you can do what's called an IRA transfer. So Noble Gold specializes in IRA transfers, which allow you to transfer your IRA into physical gold and silver with zero taxes or penalties. So if you want to learn more about this right now, open a new tab and go to goldwithseth.com, or you can call 877-646-5347 to speak to someone right now. Again, that's 877-646-5347. And finally, today's show is brought to you by Rise TV. Rise TV is literally the reason why I can do Man in America full time. With big tech censorship and demonetization, they have made it really tough for people like me with a mission to tell the truth. And that's why we built Rise TV. So if you want to join the Q&A at the end of the show, there's a link for a free trial in the description below. Come try it out. I think you'll end up staying. All right, so on to today's show. So we have an incredible show put together for you today. I'm sure you've been following the Russia-Ukraine narrative, and it was the entire mainstream media coming out saying basically anything that was pro-Putin or even anything questioning what the mainstream narrative was about Ukraine, anything but just blindly support Ukraine no matter what, was being censored, mocked, ridiculed, etc. Especially when the whole Biolab theory started coming out. Now, to give you a little bit of framing on that for folks that maybe haven't been following, there's a Twitter user named, I think it was BioClandestine, that discovered through overlaying the maps of where Putin's airstrikes were happening and the maps of where these biological laboratories were in Ukraine, that it looked like Putin was actually specifically targeting these laboratories. Now, as soon as that started going viral, his Twitter account was deleted within 24 hours, which is a huge red flag. Remember, as I always tell you, follow the mainstream narrative, follow the big tech, what they're censoring, and they're going to tell you what's true by trying to lead you away from it. So that all played out. And then you had all these people coming out and denying this is existing, saying it was this far-right conspiracy theory that these biolabs. But there's been significant research and evidence that have been coming out and showing that they're real. And so that's what I'm going to dig into today. So more of that evidence, but the deeper I started researching, and this is the real hook of today's show, the more I was digging into this, the more I realized it goes much, much deeper. So let's go ahead and start. I'll bring up a web page for you here. We've got, again, here, as I mentioned, here's Reuters. Now this was just yesterday. This was yesterday evening. So again, amidst all the information that's coming out, they're still holding tight to this narrative. So here you have Reuters saying, U.S. dismisses Russian claims of biowarfare labs in Ukraine. So here you go. The United States on Wednesday denied renewed Russian accusations that Washington was operating biowarfare labs in Ukraine, calling the claims laughable and suggesting that Moscow may be laying the groundwork to use a chemical or biological weapon. So keep that in mind, that what they're doing with this whole narrative is they're mocking it, but then they're actually pinning it on Russia. And they're saying, well, this is a conspiracy theory, and it's probably because they're going to end up doing this. Now, I'll make a quick statement here. By coming out with this information, I'm not coming out and saying I'm pro-Putin or pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine, anti-Zelensky. To be honest, I think that they're all corrupt. I really do. I'm just trying to prevent you, or trying to provide you with a different perspective. I'm trying to dig in, because this is an interesting thing, because we saw with COVID, we saw this massive, massive psychological operation. You couldn't question anything, but you still had a lot of people that were speaking out against it. You still had a lot of people like Rand Paul or Ron DeSantis, or even some of the conservative media pundits that were still speaking out against it, and still speaking out against the lockdowns, questioning the Wuhan lab theory, etc. Yet what's really interesting is that with the whole Russia situation, Russia-Ukraine, you don't have any of that. This is the most one-sided I've ever seen a narrative. It is so one-sided. You even have people that I thought would have been at least questioning things, right? At least questioning things. Nope, everyone's following the exact same narrative. And that always sends off massive red flags for me. Now, I know that last night, Tucker Carlson started actually talking about these biolabs, and we're going to talk about that today, because I think that it exposes something about Fox News, which I'm going to share with you. And of course, I'm glad to see him doing it. And so we're going to talk about why he's doing it, what his angle is, what he's saying in between the lines, and ultimately what it tells us about Fox News and how they're trying to keep us hooked into them for coverage. Okay, so back to looking at what's happening in the talking heads. We have, of course, as I mentioned, we've got Reuters here. We've got Jen Psaki. This is yesterday, coming out with the exact same narrative. She's saying, we took note of Russia's false claims about alleged U.S. biological weapons labs and chemical weapons development in Ukraine. We've also seen Chinese officials echo these conspiracy theories. Again, look for these keywords. Whenever you see them use the word conspiracy theory, for instance, like, you have to remember that word conspiracy theory, that was invented by the CIA a long time ago as a way to label people. Right? This is all part of brainwashing. They use these keywords. It's kind of like with the jab, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. Well, if you watched my show from Tuesday, which unfortunately I wouldn't do that show on YouTube or Facebook for the obvious reasons, you would see that it really wasn't. Anyway, so back to this. So Jen Psaki is coming out and she's saying, this is preposterous. It's the kind of disinformation operation we've seen repeatedly from the Russians over the years in Ukraine and in other countries, which have been debunked, and an example of the types of false pretexts we have been warning the Russians would invent. The United States is in full compliance with its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Biological Weapons Convention, and does not develop or possess such weapons anywhere. So, Wuhan, anybody? Gain of Function Research, Chapel Hill, North Carolina lab, Ralph Barrick, Fauci. I don't know. But let's take a listen to what Russia is saying, because I bet if you're watching most mainstream media, even Fox News, they're not showing you what the Russians are saying. So let's take a look at this video. This is from a Russian, I think this is one of the state medias from Russia. Let's take a look at what she's saying here.
We have found your own products. We have found your biological material. It was developed primarily for military purposes. As it turns out, it was all happening in Ukraine. What were you doing there? It's a different continent. It has no borders with you. There are no bases of yours. What were they doing there under the guise of scientific research? Your specialist, among others, on a regular basis, they were giving instructions to the Ukrainian side as to the purposes of their studies involved. Now, considering that we have the evidence that cannot be refuted, we demand that you provide details. The world must know. What were you intending to do there? To what end? Within which deadline? what was the amount of the so-called investments in the biological activities of Ukraine.
So you can see that Russian state media, they're directly calling out the US. Now, with the banning of Russian media like RT and Sputnik, who have seen, those two media companies have seen their apps pulled out of the app stores around the world. So for Google, Apple, Microsoft, the YouTube is now stepping up its censorship of these channels. You're seeing this massive move in all of these companies. You're seeing this coordinated effort in all of these companies, giant corporations around the world. Even McDonald's is closing down their stores in Russia, which I wish that would happen in America, because I think we'd be better off without that. You want to talk about biological weapons attacks? How about the McDonald's that are on every street corner in America? To me, that's more of the biological weapons attack. Look what's doing to the Americans. But if you look at what's happening here, though, is that the Russians, they're coming out and they're asking honest questions. They're saying, look, we have found evidence of biological weapons labs in Ukraine and research, and this evidence points back to you, United States. You need to come out and speak about this. But you have the United States coming out, like I'll show you right here. Here's a tweet from this is from the Department of State. They're coming out, and this was yesterday evening. Fact: the United States does not have chemical and biological weapons labs in Ukraine. And then they go on to say the U.S. is in full compliance with its obligations under the Biological Weapons Convention and does not develop or possess chemical and biological weapons anywhere. That's a pretty absolute statement, if you'd ask me. Now, I know that the criminals, they're using these slip of the tongue, they're using this double speak to communicate these things. They're saying, look, we don't have biological weapons labs. They might say we have biological research labs. We don't have biological weapons labs, right? So they're saying, no, it's not a red ball. It's a burnt orange colored ball. So they're using this doublespeak, but you have to realize is that Wuhan, the laboratory in Wuhan, wasn't a biological weapons laboratory. They will still tell you it's a biological research laboratory. So I'm not going to buy into that whole narrative. So what you probably saw, so Senator Marco Rubio was interviewing the woman, who you'll see here shortly, who was overseeing the Ukraine and these programs in Ukraine. So watch this dialogue, watch this question. And what's interesting with this is that as he sets up this question to ask about these weapon labs, I don't think that he expected her to answer in the way that she did. And I don't think that she expected the question to come from him. But watch her body language. Watch her body language in this video. It's very, very telling. Just check this one out.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question.
There you go. So that was Victoria Nuland, who, if you trace her back, she was integral in the coup that happened in 2013, 2014, where the deep state basically pulled out the pro-Russia president of Ukraine and put their own person in. She was one of the key people in facilitating that coup in Ukraine at that time. So what's interesting, though, is if you watch her body language, you can see her fidgeting with her pen. She's really nervous. But then if you look at her answer, again, she's using that doublespeak. She's using that confusing language. It's like reminds me of Fauci talking about something when Rand Paul's grilling Fauci. And she's saying, well, no, we don't have these, but we are concerned that Russia would be getting access to the materials, the biological materials that were in these laboratories. And so this particular interview, this questioning of her from Senator Marco Rubio is what really, really toppled the entire narrative. Because how can you come out and say that, as we saw, look, again, pull up that tweet again, how can the Department of State come out and say, fact, the United States does not have chemical and biological weapons labs in Ukraine, and the U.S. is in full compliance with its obligations under the Biological Weapons Convention and does not develop or possess chemical and biological weapons anywhere? How can they come out and say that when one of their own folks just got done answering in a public forum that there are biological materials that they're concerned about Russia getting? It just doesn't make sense. They are openly lying. And this is what made me start really researching this, because what's behind this? What is the deeper thing to this? What are they trying to hide? Because like we saw with COVID, the jab, etc., is that when you see this massive coordinated effort to say, look here, look here, look here, I'm like, well, what's over there? I want to go look over there. So we're going to be digging into that. So here's another interview. This was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Russia asking the same questions. And I'm sure you didn't see this on mainstream media. So let me pull up this video right here.
Biological laboratories funded by the United States, they use Ukrainian territory to experiment on pathogens that subsequently could be used to create biological weapon. And the fact that Washington officials said they are not doing anything illegal on Ukraine comes as no surprise. And the European Union right away, they started saying in unison that European Union has no information that the Americans were perpetrating some illegal scientific researching activity in Ukraine also comes as no surprise. And the representative of the UN saying that they have no such information also comes as no surprise, because the Americans did this in secret, in deep secret. Same like they work in other post-Soviet states, creating their military biological laboratories along the border of the Russian Federation and the Chinese People's Republic.
So again, you still see him coming out asking the same question, but all they're getting is just denial from the United States. They're getting denial, and they're saying this is all Russian propaganda, and then they're censoring it globally. Now, what is important to understand here, and I'm going to dig deep into this in the second half of the show, is that the United States government is one of the most corrupt governments in the world. I'd put them very close to China. And again, look, I'm a patriot. I love my country. And I think the American people are amazing, incredible people. But the people that are in charge of our government, they have been corrupted for a very, 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 very long time. If you go back into Operation Paperclip right after World War II, when we brought over so many Nazis, it was around 1,600 after World War II, 1,600 of the top German Nazi scientists and engineers were brought over into the United States and put into key positions. You think that we weren't bringing them over to get their biological weapons research? What kind of gas were they using? All the experiments that they did, the medical experiments, the technology, the weapons technology. The United States government is incredibly, incredibly corrupt. When we talk about the deep state, it runs so deep in the U.S. Now, I believe that a lot of it ties to the British Crown, and so I'm not going to get into that in this episode. But just keep in mind that when I'm talking about the United States here, I'm not demonizing the U.S. people. I think by now we probably see, especially with Biden sitting in the White House and Kamala Harris over in Poland making a fool of herself, we can see these people do not represent us. They do not care for us. And actually, they might be actively trying to destroy our country to fit into a globalist plan of the Great Reset, which is where I think a lot of this falls into. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And because I think that if you look at what's behind this war that's happening. There are a lot of people that are saying that Putin's a white hat and Putin's this. I don't think so. I think that Putin is a nationalist. I think Putin is trying to protect the interests of his country from the globalists. And he's come out and talked about that. He's called them pedophiles. He called them Satanists. Like, he's very openly come after these globalists before. And a lot of the top people in the U.S. are characters like George Soros, Obama, these people that have played a critical role, especially in Ukraine, where they've set up a very, very, very threatening state and country right on his border. So he's come out against them. But what's also made me wonder, though, is if you look at what's happening as a result of this war, the timing of it, and part of me thinks that there's a chance that Putin fell into a trap with this. Part of me thinks that the deep state wanted Putin to start this war against Ukraine because the COVID narrative was drying up. People were seeing through it. And look how quickly they've forgotten. The truckers, look at the truckers up in Canada. Right as they hit the peak of what they're doing, right as you have the convoys starting here in America, all of a sudden, it's all eyes on Russia, right? It went from Russia, COVID, and now it's Ukraine. And unfortunately, I know it's not you, but so many of the American people, so many people around the world, they just follow that carrot wherever it leads them. They just go wherever that mainstream narrative takes them. And those are the people that we have to help them see past this. And that's a big reason why I do my show as Man in America. It's because I want to give you the tools to wake these people up, help them see through these illusions. And I want to also help you see through the illusions, and help myself see through the illusions. A lot of times you are helping me see through this stuff. So if you look at what's happening with this, so one of my concerns is that he was baited. And that maybe there's some things that we don't know about. That I know that there's been discussions, there's been reports coming out from the Russian military saying that they basically discovered plans for multiple types of attacks. There are rumors or there's information coming out saying that they discovered plans for a biological weapons attack against Russia, that they discovered that they were researching the Russian genetics to develop weapons to specifically target the Russian people. There were plans that Kiev was going to be doing more of a military offensive on the Donbass region, which is the very pro-Russian region of Ukraine. So there's a chance that the deep state might have intentionally leaked these reports so that Putin would feel like he had no other option but to wage this attack and start to come after them in Ukraine because he has to protect his people. Right? Just like Donald Trump. Donald Trump was all about make America great again. America first. America first. So I can understand from Putin's perspective, Russia first. He wants to protect his own people. I'm not saying he's an angel. I'm not saying he's a white hat. He's got deep KGB ties, deep communist ties. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to frame what the overall situation could look like and what could cause that. And my concern is that this became the greatest opportunity for a new round of censorship. Like, honestly, right now, I'm on YouTube and Facebook, I'm talking about this. It would not surprise me if within a week or so, YouTube comes out because Google is already publishing, they're already publishing articles talking about how they're going to start taking their own step towards eliminating the spread of misinformation, right? There's their keyword that they call us conspiracy theorists because we spread misinformation. That's their keyword. Look for it. There's already information coming out, Google saying that. So it would not be surprising to me if within a week, Google puts out a statement and they say, look, anybody on YouTube, if you are now spreading misinformation about what's happening in Russia, we're going to cancel your account. We're going to demonetize you. You're going to get a strike. The same reason I can't talk about what happened in November 2020. The same reason I got kicked off of YouTube for a week for interviewing some woman from Pfizer. It's the same thing. And so I think that the whole Russia narrative is just the next step in that. What you're seeing, it's amazing, but in a lot of ways, it's the globalists flexing their power. They're flexing their strength because look how overnight they can collapse a country, which I believe, unfortunately, I think that Russia has a really difficult time ahead of them. You look what's happening financially with the SWIFT system. You look at all the corporations pulling out of there. Even Upwork, there's a company called Upwork you can use to hire people. I was looking to hire a sound engineer locally to help out with some of my new setup. They have a big banner that says Upwork is no longer operating in Russia. So you can see overnight this entire globalist criminal system can turn on an entire country the same way they turned on Donald Trump. So my concern, though, is that this is playing exactly into their hand, and it's exactly what they want, because now it's a new excuse to destroy America. It's a new excuse to say, you know what, we're not going to activate the Keystone pipeline, but we're going to stop importing Russian gas or Russian oil and gas. Again, this comes back to the American people. I'm convinced, I really believe the current administration, it is their goal to destroy America. And if I would have told you that, say, a year ago, maybe you or a lot of your friends would be like, yeah, it's a little bit extreme, Seth. But now most people can see it. They can see that the people in charge are not trying to protect us. They're trying to destroy us. And so I am concerned that what we're seeing play out over there is becoming the next thing that's going to do that. It's going to be hitting the global supply chains. We're seeing things about wheat, the supply chain of wheat, the obviously gasoline, oil, those kinds of prices going up. I do believe, honestly, and I've talked about this before, and I will keep emphasizing it, I believe that we are entering into a stage of history where there's going to be a lot of hardship. Now, of course, if you follow me, you know that I truly believe that God wins in the end. And in the end, that the righteous people will stand forth and we will be taken care of. But it's not after what could be a lot of suffering. So I'll keep beating the dead horse. If you're not prepared, please take it seriously to prepare. Make sure you get at least 3 months of food. If you live in America, and you have a state that has decent gun laws, get a way to protect your family, to protect your food. Make sure you have water sources. Go back and watch my prepping video. It's something I really recommend you take seriously, because I think that, honestly, and this is my genuine belief, I'm not trying to be a fear monger. I think that within the next, say 12 to 18 months or so, we're going to see an economic collapse, and we're going to see things happen that might make the Great Depression look like we'd want to live in that time. It could be very bad, because this is global. It's global, because they're trying to put us into their new world order. But I don't think they're going to win. I really don't think so, because they don't have God on their side. But there's a little side point on that. So getting back into this. So as I showed you the video, the Russian Minister of Defense, who's talking about the fact that, that they're coming after, they have these weapons in Ukraine and that they're testing them in Ukraine. So I want to bring up an article for you. And this is a new journalist I discovered. Her first name is Dilyana. She is from, I think she's from Bulgaria. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce her last name. I apologize. And I would like to end up interviewing her. If you want to go to her website, it's just, you see it right there. It's Dilyana, DILYANA.BG. She is an investigative journalist that has specialized in looking into basically biological weapons experiments, weapons of mass destruction, truly the true ones, gun running across the Middle East. And she was actually kicked out. I think that she was kicked out of the one of the EUs as a reporter because she was pressing on biological weapons research. So this is an article I discovered. Okay, documents expose U.S. biological experiments on Allied soldiers in Ukraine and Georgia. Now, something really important about this I want you to look at is the date this article was written. This article was written January 24th, 2022. This article was written before the entire Russia-Ukraine popped off. This isn't just some new propaganda that Russia's come out with to give a reason for their war. So let's scroll down here real quick. What'd she say? Again, keep in mind, this was written in January. She says, while the U.S. is planning to increase its military presence in Eastern Europe to protect its allies against Russia, internal documents show what American protection in practical terms means. The Pentagon has conducted biological experiments with a potentially lethal outcome on 4,400 soldiers in Ukraine and 1,000 soldiers in Georgia. According to leaked documents, all volunteer deaths should be reported within 24 hours in Ukraine and 48 hours in Georgia. Both countries are considered the most loyal U.S. partners in the region, with a number of Pentagon programs being implemented in their territory. One of them is the $2.5 billion Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, Biological Engagement Program, which includes research on bioagents, deadly viruses, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria being studied on the local population. Now, what's great about this woman's research is that she includes all of the documents. I'm not going to get into this because it's really detailed, and I have some much more detailed information to get into afterwards, but she actually has scans of the documents outlining these things. She has scans talking about their, reporting all volunteer deaths. Now, what's crazy about this, and this is mind-blowing to me, scroll down, U.S. personnel are indemnified for deaths and injuries to the local population. What's it mean to indemnify? It means that you cannot be prosecuted, you cannot be come after, you cannot be sued, you cannot get in trouble, you have diplomatic immunity. So it says here, the DTRA activities in Georgia and Ukraine fall under the protection of special bilateral agreements. According to these agreements, Georgia and Ukraine shall hold harmless, bring no legal proceedings, and indemnify the United States and its personnel, contractors, and contractors' personnel for damage to property or death or injury to any persons in Georgia and Ukraine arising out of activities under this agreement. If DTRA-sponsored scientists cause deaths or injuries to the local population, they cannot be held accountable. Do you understand how significant this is? The labs that have been set up in these regions, and I'm going to get into the ones all because they're all over the world, they've been set up with agreements that the United States government is indemnified. The United States government cannot be held responsible. So imagine, look at what happened that came out of Wuhan. Imagine if a biological weapon was released accidentally. It's so easy for them to say, oh, there's a lab leak. Imagine if that happened in Ukraine and 500,000 people died. The U.S. has already agreed with Ukraine that the Ukraine cannot hold the U.S. responsible. Even if there is a U.S. scientist that was in the lab that intentionally released this thing and killed 500,000 people, Ukraine cannot hold that person responsible. This is insane. It says, furthermore, according to the U.S.-Ukraine agreement, claims by third parties for deaths and injuries in Ukraine arising out of the acts or omissions of any employees of the United States related to work under this agreement shall be the responsibility of Ukraine. So if there's some scientist that's in Ukraine that chooses to release a biological weapon, as they say, arising out of acts or omissions, an act, it's the responsibility of the Ukraine. Look at what the United States is doing. Now, again, this is not the United States as we know. What this is what they call the military-industrial complex. This is what they call the military-industrial complex. If that's a new term for you, maybe I'll do a whole show just covering the military-industrial complex. It is a giant black budget, trillions of dollars going into it, just being emptied into it for all kinds of research. We're talking, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the tip of the iceberg. So, but something I want to talk to you about here that I wanted to get into was Tucker Carlson, because we had Tucker Carlson come on last night. And it was funny because my mom, who's probably watching now, she texted me and she's like, Seth, Tucker's talking about the Biolabs. And she goes, he's saying the exact same things you were saying a week ago. I said, yeah. I wondered why. Because again, if you know me, I don't trust Fox News. But let's just look at the introduction to his show that he pulled on last night. So let's just go ahead and pull up good old Tucker.
And welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If you had told us just 4 days ago that the Biden administration was funding secret biolabs in Ukraine, of all places, we would not have believed you. Yeah, I don't think we're going to put that on TV. No thanks. Then if you told us that not only did the administration fund these secret biolabs in Ukraine, but that they then failed to secure the deadly contents of those labs before the Russian invasion, an invasion they knew was coming, an invasion they helped encourage, if you had told us that 4 days ago, we'd have dismissed you as a nut. It was just too preposterous. We would not want anything to do with a story like that. There was no way it could be true. It's too far out. In any case, we already knew for a fact that that story was false. How do we know that? Because we read USA Today, America's newspaper. Within hours of the Russian invasion, USA Today published a rebuttal to all those crazies who are yammering on about secret Ukrainian biolabs. Here was the headline. Fact check. False claim of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine tied to Russian disinformation campaign. So if you look carefully at the story, and we did, because we were interested, you notice that this fact check was sourced to Ukrainian government unnamed officials, and then Biden's State Department officials. So these were not exactly objective sources on this subject, but still, the story seemed definitive. It was totally emphatic. Quote, Russia has teamed up with China to further amplify the false claim of U.S. labs in Ukraine. Okay, USA Today says it's Russian disinformation. Maybe it is. On to the next story. But the fact checks didn't stop. That was weird. We kept seeing the same fact check again and again.
So he gets into and he starts talking about a lot of the same things I'm talking to you about here. But there's a few things I want to point out about this. Now, for one, look, I'm happy that Tucker is talking about these things. Tucker reaches a large mainstream audience. I'm not sure, maybe you watch him. Look, I watch the occasional clip. I don't support Fox. I don't sign up for them. I don't pay for their services. If I see a clip like this floating around, I'll watch it. That's about it. But what's really important here is this. One, he says it outright at the beginning of this. He says that there were all these conspiracies floating around about these biolabs. And he says, of course, we're not going to cover that because it's a conspiracy. So of course we're not going to cover it. But later in this video, he talks about the interview I showed you before with Marco Rubio. And he says, but now that we have a U.S. official admitting to it, we're going to cover it. So what's really, really important here for you is that to look to see through how Fox works like this is that they're not investigating these things. They're not looking into these things to break these stories to us. What they're doing is that Tucker is the person that Tucker is the one that is the bird dog, right? He's the one that they're using to lead the patriots that are more on the forefront of researching, because that's what keeps you involved in Fox News. Is you might say, well, Tucker was talking about it. So that's what keeps you watching all their other programs. Now, Jack Sobiek made an interesting point about this interview with Tucker, the show with Tucker. He said that just after Tucker finishes going on for almost an hour about these Ukraine biolabs, you've got Hannity and the next person back with the same Russia, Putin talking points. So again, this is just a small thing. Now, Tucker could be a super patriot and he could be completely tied down by the Murdochs and what he's able to say, because we know the Murdochs are globalists. They're on the committees, they go to the Bilderberg meetings, etc. I'm not going to get into the Murdochs right here. Okay, but what you have to hone in on is the fact that Fox News, they will only cover the things when they have to. Because even though Tucker said, oh yeah, even a week ago we heard rumblings about these biolabs, are they not journalists? Can they not do their own research? He's telling you, look, we didn't do our own research. We're not going to look into those conspiracies. We're not going to touch those things until someone in the U.S. government, in that interview I showed you with Marco Rubio, comes out and says, hey, okay, maybe these things are happening, then they cover it. So just be extra mindful of that, because there's a lot of deception here. And so, but let's kind of dive back into the overall Biolab story, because it goes a lot deeper. Now, something that's interesting about this, and I'm going to show you this, is this story broke this morning. Guess whose son has ties to bioweapons labs in Ukraine? I'll give you three guesses. Is it A, Donald Trump? Is it B, Michael Jackson? Or is it C, President Biden? I said Resident Biden. No P there. Well, let's take a look here. Because Resident Biden's son, exclusive, Hunter Biden firm Rosemont Seneca, invested in firm tied to Ukrainian biolabs. So let's take a look here. So Hunter Biden's firm, Rosemont Seneca, provided capital for the firms behind the creation of biolabs in Ukraine. They say, we heard on Tuesday from the U.S. State Department that there were no U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Then on Wednesday, the Biden regime backtracked and insisted that there were no U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. So why the sudden confusing messaging from the Biden gang, especially when there are documents that prove the U.S. was funding several of the biolabs they set up in Ukraine, which I'll show you some of those documents shortly, to study the potentially dangerous pathogens. Well, it may be because Hunter Biden's firm, Rosemont Seneca, was funding the firms involved in the building of these labs in Ukraine, and they felt this was not something they wanted the American people to know. InfoWars, I give it to Alex Jones, put together an excellent article with connections between Hunter Biden and the firm Metabiota, which keep that name in the back of your mind because we're going to come back to that. Metabiota, or Metabiota, which was involved in the creation of biolabs in Ukraine. The Gateway pundit identified through the Wayback Machine, which is a way you can look at previous archives of the internet, that Rosemont Seneca provided capital invested in Metabiota as noted on the firm's website back in 2014. It's listed on the Our Team Investments on the Rosemont Seneca webpage. So they also located a number of documents from the Wayback Machine that show that the Department of Defense invested in the creation of biolabs in the Ukraine with the help of firm Black & Veatch. So remember the name Black & Veatch, okay? So here's a sample of one of the documents. They found nearly a dozen of these documents there, okay? So the U.S. State Department admitted to having biolabs in Ukraine on Tuesday in front of the U.S. Senate. That's the interview with Marco Rubio I showed you. But then yesterday, the Biden White House claimed these biolabs in Ukraine were not biological weapons labs. Well, Wuhan wasn't a, quote, biological weapons lab. He says, today we have confirmation that there were biolabs in Ukraine and Hunter Biden's firm, Rosemont Seneca, invested in the firms who were building these labs. Folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The stuff that we dig up, whether it's Gateway Pundit or the Epoch Times or myself, the stuff that we're digging up is probably 1% of 1% of the corruption that we have happening. Now, let's go to another organization, another news organization, to get some more information about the U.S. weapons, in germ warfare. Because for the people that are saying that U.S. has never done this, right? You have the tweet from the State Department saying that we do not, they're denying it wholesale. What do you think the New York Times have to say about that? My guess is that the New York Times would probably be coming out supporting the exact same narrative. I'm sure that if you go right now to the New York Times website, you might even find articles on there saying that far-right Russian conspiracy theorists are claiming that there's biolabs in Ukraine. They're claiming that the U.S. is engaging in biolabs research around the world, like a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Well, it just so happens that I found an article from the New York Times from 2001 that I want to share with you. Check out what we have right here. Keep in mind, this is New York Times 2001. U.S. germ warfare research pushes treaty limits. So I'm going to first take a step back and show you and talk to you about the actual treaty. So I've got here, I had it flagged in the article, about the original treaty. So during the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union produced a vast quantity of germ weapons, enough to kill everyone on Earth. Eager to halt the spread of what many called the poor man's atom bomb, the United States unilaterally gave up germ arms and helped lead the global campaign to abolish them. By 1975, most of the world's nations had signed the convention. So imagine that U.S. becomes the country that leads the way, that sets the path to getting rid of all germ research around this. It's almost like, say you have a really naughty high schooler and everyone's smoking cigarettes. He says, you know what? I'm going to lead the way. I'm going to stop smoking. Everyone turn your cigarettes in. Okay, everyone turns them in. He goes and he collects all of them and he's behind the building smoking cigarettes. This is what the United States did. So in 1975, they agreed to have this treaty to no longer do biological weapons research. So what's the New York Times have to say about that? Because this is 2001, back when the New York Times might have actually been a little more accurate in their reporting, a little less controlled perhaps. So here's what they say. Over the past several years, the United States has embarked on a program of secret research on biological weapons that some officials say tests the limits of the global treaty banning such weapons. The 1972 treaty forbids nations from developing or acquiring weapons that spread disease, but it allows work on jabs and other protected measures. Government officials said the secret research, which mimicked the major steps a state or terrorist would take to create a biological arsenal, was aimed at better understanding the threat. The projects, which have not been previously disclosed, had begun under President Clinton and have been embraced by the Bush administration, which intends to expand them. Imagine that under Clinton, they're doing biological weapons research, and then he hands it over to Bush, and Bush is like, okay, sure, great. Let's go ahead and continue this weapons research. Okay, so here we go and continue a little bit further. So 2 other projects completed during the Clinton administration focused on the mechanics of making germ weapons. Okay, so you're telling me that they're doing things, they're doing experiments and focusing on the mechanics of making germ weapons, yet they're not allowed to do biological weapons research according to this treaty. Okay, and it says in here that the Clinton administration did not know about all these things happening. Sure, I'll buy that. So what's interesting though is they come down here and they say among the facilities likely to be open to inspection under the draft agreement would be the West Jefferson, Ohio laboratory of the Battelle Memorial Institute, a military contractor that has been selected to create genetically altered anthrax. Several officials who served in senior posts in the Clinton administration acknowledged that the secretive efforts were so poorly coordinated that even the White House was unaware of their full scope, poorly coordinated or intentionally left out. So just a little side note, West Jefferson, Ohio, the Battelle laboratory, that was almost my backyard growing up. It was maybe 10 miles away from where I grew up. And Battelle is this company that everyone looks up to. I almost got a job out of college in Battelle doing design for them. Right. So in Battelle, it just so happens to be, as I've learned, I have family that used to work there, had careers, long careers at Battelle. Some still actually work there. Hopefully they're not watching this. Battelle is one of the main private companies working together with the CIA to develop biological weapons. They were building biological weapons in my backyard. That's surprising. So continuing on here with this, we talk about the original treaty. So in the mid-1990s, the CIA and other intelligence agencies stepped up their research for information about other nations' biological research programs, focusing on the former Soviet Union, Iran, Iraq, and Libya, among others. Much of the initial emphasis was on germs that enemies might use in an attack, officials said. But in 1997, the agency embarked on Clear Vision, which focused on the weapons system that would deliver the germs. So basically what they're saying is that how they got around the whole treaty is that the CIA and the Pentagon are coming out and they're saying, look, if our enemy is going to build a biological weapon to use against us, we have to know how it works. So we're going to have to build these biological weapons in the delivery systems and then be able to use them so that way we understand how they work. But we're not building these biological weapons to use them as a weapon. We're building them to use them to understand how our enemy is using them. All these loopholes. And the thing is that these big companies, these corporations, they don't care about the actual treaties. As we've seen, they don't care. This is all a lot of this is just what the public sees. You know how much military black budget stuff is taking place down in the deep underground military bases, and it's just there's a whole series to be done on that stuff. But let's just take a look, and this is where it gets deeper. Remember, I told you that Ukraine was the tip of the iceberg. Okay, well, the woman I showed you earlier, let me pull up her website again, that was researching all of this. She has done extensive research. I'm going to show you this right now. This is Dilyana, again, so Dilyana.bg. That's the website, Dilyana.bg. I'd like to actually talk to her and have her come on the show. I want to interview her because she really knows her stuff. This is what I'm going to show you, is that the Pentagon's biological weapons research program is global. This is why I think they're freaking out about Ukraine, is because Ukraine is just exposing what they're doing. Because now that all eyes are on Ukraine, and maybe that was part of Putin's idea with this, maybe that was part of Putin's ploy with this whole war, because he needed people to see what the US government and the deep state were doing in his backyard, because Ukraine is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so now, interesting point. When was this article written? She wrote this article April 29th, 2018. This article is almost 3 years old. Almost 3 years old. So keep that in mind. Is this Russian disinformation? No. She says the U.S. Army regularly produces deadly viruses, bacteria, and toxins in direct violation of the UN Convention on the Prohibition of Biological Weapons. Hundreds of thousands of unwitting people are systematically exposed to dangerous pathogens and other incurable diseases. Biowarfare scientists using diplomatic cover test man-made viruses at Pentagon biolaboratories in 25 countries around the world. These U.S. biolaboratories are funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency under a $2.1 billion military program, the Cooperative Biological Engagement Program, CBEP, and are located in former Soviet Union countries such as Georgia and Ukraine, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Okay, do you hear that? Biowarfare scientists using diplomatic cover. What's diplomatic cover? Remember I told you in Ukraine, they have that set up so that the United States and all their people are indemnified. That's what you call diplomatic cover. So these biowarfare scientists using diplomatic cover test man-made viruses at Pentagon biolaboratories in 25 countries across the world. Multi-billion-dollar funding behind this. Here's just some of these countries. Let me make this full screen for you. That's loading too slow. Let's do it this way. Okay, here's some of these countries. If you follow me on Telegram, you follow me on Truth Social, I shared this the other day as I came across this. These are just some of the these biolaboratories that are funded by the Pentagon. They're in Iran, Iraq, all across Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Philippines, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand. These are everywhere. And honestly, there's probably a lot more of them. These are just the ones that we know about. So let's just take a look at what she's saying here. So this article, this is a massive article. Okay, and I'm not going to be getting into all the details because it would take me an hour just to cover this article with you. But she goes in here and she shows the exact laboratories that are being used. She goes into this. Okay, so Pentagon contractors produce bioagents under diplomatic cover. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, has outsourced much of the work under the military program to private companies which are not held accountable to Congress and which can operate more freely and move around the rule of law. This is a really important fact here, okay, is that they intentionally outsource this work to private companies. So you have the military that goes to companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Battelle. They're outsourcing this work to these private companies because these private companies are not held accountable to Congress. If you look at what happened with Wuhan, EcoHealth Alliance, and the NIH, it's the same thing they're doing. They're taking taxpayer money, they're taking taxpayer government money, they're funneling it into these private companies through these various means, and then they're using that money for illegal things. They're not accountable to the rule of law of Congress. Illegal research, weapons development, who knows what kind of testing they're doing on human beings, etc. And that's how they're bypassing it. So they're using our taxpayer dollars to build bioweapons labs around the world, like the one in Wuhan, that they can use against us, the people. Okay? So let's keep going down here. Let's take a look at a few more of these things. Remember I mentioned Battelle? So the CIA Battelle Project Clear Vision. So the Project Clear Vision between 1997 and 2000 was a joint investigation by the CIA and the Battelle Memorial Institute under a contract awarded by the agency, reconstructed and tested a Soviet-era anthrax bomblet in order to test its dissemination characteristics. The project's stated goal was to assess bioagents' dissemination characteristics of bomblets. The clandestine CIA Battelle operation was omitted from the U.S. Biological Weapons Convention declaration submitted to the UN. Okay, remember I talked about they're not accountable to Congress? Well, it looks like they're not accountable to the UN as well. So they are taking these, they're using these private companies, okay? They're using these private companies, and now these private companies, oh, it's not the U.S. government doing this. Oh, the UN, but like the UN cares anyway. You got Klaus Schwab and those fools and those organizations. They're all for this stuff. But again, they're using these private companies to do taxpayer-funded illegal activities. So Battelle Battelle has operated a top secret biolaboratory at Fort Detrick, Maryland, under a U.S. Department of Homeland Security contract for the last decade. The company has been awarded a $344 million federal contract from 2006 to 2016 and another $17.3 million contract from 2015 to 2026. So the U.S. government is taking our taxpayer money, handing out these $344 million contracts to private companies to develop weapons for the U.S. government to use to control the population around the world. All right, let's keep going here. What this is showing is the details of this, and it gets into some of the leaks of these things and the deaths that they've caused. But do you remember that company we talked about, Metabiota, which is a company that Hunter Biden was his company, his investment capital, Seneca, I forget the first name, was funneling money into this company, Metabiota Inc. So here he goes again. It comes up again. The U.S. company, Metabiota Inc., has been awarded $18.4 million in federal contracts under the Pentagon's DTRA program in Georgia and Ukraine. Keep in mind this article was written in 2018 for scientific and technological consulting services. Metabiota services include global field-based biological threat research, pathogen discovery, outbreak response, and clinical trials. Metabiota Inc. had been contracted by the Pentagon to perform work for DTRA before and during the Ebola crisis in West Africa and was awarded for $3.1 million for the work in Sierra Leone, one of the countries at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak. So this is something interesting, is that, and I'm not going to be getting into these details, this is a whole other show. If you look at a lot of the outbreaks that have happened over the years, things like the Ebola, you can almost always find a Pentagon-funded biological laboratory in that region. So here we go. So Metabiota worked on a Pentagon project at the epicenter of the Ebola crisis, where 3 U.S. biolabs are situated. Okay, so right here, you look at that map right there. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. Okay, the little markers there, there's 3 markers. Those are the biological weapons laboratories, or the biological research laboratories, as they're telling us. Okay, the level of transmission. Red is new active area, orange is active, and yellow is not active, meaning it had gone past there. Look at that. Do you think it's a coincidence that there's 3 Pentagon-funded biolabs in the region where there was an outbreak of Ebola? Is that a coincidence? Don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Don't forget, that's the company that Mr. Hunter Biden was funding. Scrolling down a little further. So, here they say, a July 17, 2014 report drafted by the Viral Hemorrhagic Fever Consortium accused Metabiota Inc. of failing to abide by an existing agreement on how to report test results and for bypassing the Sierra Leonean scientists working there. The report also raised the possibility that Metabiota was culturing blood cells at the lab, something the report said was dangerous, as well as misdiagnosing healthy patients. All of those allegations were denied by Metabiota. Okay, there you go. This gets into this article again. This goes into insects. So they call it entomological warfare. That could do a whole show on entomological warfare, which is basically the weaponization of insects. I just saw a report this morning. They're getting ready to release more GMO mosquitoes with a Gates-funded company into Florida and California. They've already released them in Florida. And so they're releasing even more of these GMO mosquitoes into Florida and California. We also know that they have been able to weaponize mosquitoes to deliver everything from biological weapons to even vaccines. You want to vaccinate a population? Great, put it into the mosquitoes, release the mosquitoes into the public, and there you go. All those people that are refusing to get it, doesn't matter. You're out there grilling a hot dog on 4th of July, you get a smack on your arm, you got a bug bite you, there you go. You got your jab. This is no joke, people. Again, a lot of this stuff points straight back to these military black budgets, industrial military complex, CIA. Okay? Here he's talking about these biting flies that were released. These are all military grade weapons. They go into this Operation White Coat. They go into your mosquitoes. Even here is a Pentagon report of how to kill 625,000 people for just 29 cents cost per death. There's literally a U.S. Army report. This was declassified. A U.S. Army report in 1981 that compared two scenarios: 16 simultaneous attacks on a city by these mosquitoes infected with yellow fever and versus an aerosol attack, and assessed their effectiveness at cost and casualties, and found that the mosquitoes were actually really affordable because you could kill 625,000 people right there. This is literally from an Army report. They're showing that you can use weaponized mosquitoes to kill 625,000 people, and it will only cost you 29 cents per death. This goes so deep. I'm not even going to get into the ticks. The ticks off the coast, again, military research. I mean, how much that is wrong with our society points back to military research. So let's scroll down though, because I've got a few more points to make as we wrap up the show before we get into the Q&A. Here we go. A military biolab blamed for a deadly CCHF outbreak in Afghanistan. So there's 237 cases of Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, CCHF, which were reported across Afghanistan, 41 which were fatal as of December 2017. According to Afghanistan's Ministry of Health, most of the cases have been registered in the capital city, Kabul, where 71 cases have been reported with 13 facilities. Afghanistan is one of the 25 countries across the world with Pentagon biolaboratories on their territory. The project in Afghanistan is part of the U.S. Biodefense Program, Cooperative Biological Engagement Program, CBEP, which is funded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. The DTRA contractors working at the Lugar Center in Georgia, CH2M Hill, and Battelle, there's Battelle again, have also been contracted for the program in Afghanistan. CH2M Hill, which I wonder if that's Chapel Hill, I don't know for sure, has been awarded a $10.4 million contract. The Pentagon contractors in Afghanistan and Georgia are the same, so the diseases which are spreading among local populations in both countries. Here we go. Have you heard about a theory about bats lately and viruses? Why the Pentagon collects and studies bats. So bats are allegedly the reservoir host to the Ebola virus, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, which is a coronavirus, and other deadly diseases. However, the precise ways these viruses are transmitted to humans are currently unknown. That's what gain-of-function research is, how to get transmissions to go to humans and spread. Numerous studies have been performed under this program in search for a deadly pathogens of military importance in bats. There you go. There's other outbreaks talking about how MERS-CoV, which is, again, it's a form of COVID, a form of coronavirus, is one of the viruses that has been engineered by the U.S. and studied by the Pentagon, as well as influenza and SARS. Confirmation of this practice is Obama's 2014 temporary ban on government funding for such dual-use research. The moratorium was lifted in 2017, and experiments have continued. Enhanced potential pandemic pathogens experiments are legal in the U.S. Such experiments aim to increase the transmissibility or virulence of pathogens. Keep in mind, she wrote this entire article. She wrote this entire article and did all this research before the COVID had even hit. Okay? And here you go. Again, this is back in 2018. Pentagon biolaboratories spread diseases in Ukraine. The DoD Defense Threat Reduction Agency has funded 11 biolaboratories in the former Soviet country, Ukraine, bordering on Russia. So all the denial of this, let's take a look at this, okay? This right here is a biolaboratory. Donor, the Department of Defense of USA. Beneficiary, Ministry of Health, Ukraine. Okay, actually one other thing to say there. Recipient, okay, the contractor team. Okay, if you can see that the contractor team, Black and Veatch Special Projects. Remember we mentioned that before with Hunter Biden? There it comes up again. Okay, so here's proof. You know what you want proof? Here's all the proof right here. That the U.S., the Pentagon, is funding biolabs in Ukraine. The U.S. military program is sensitive information. Ukraine has no control over the military biolaboratories in its own territory. Remember, we looked at this. According to the 2005 agreement between the U.S. DoD and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, the Ukrainian government is prohibited from public disclosure of sensitive information about the U.S. program, and Ukraine is obliged to transfer to the U.S. DoD dangerous pathogens for biological research. The Pentagon has granted access to certain state secrets of Ukraine in connection with the projects under this agreement. Again, here they have diplomatic cover. And this just goes on. And here they have instances of when these things were leaked. 364 Ukrainians died from swine flu. One of the Pentagon laboratories is located in Kharkiv, where in January 2016, at least 20 Ukrainian soldiers died from flu-like virus in just 2 days, with 200 more being hospitalized. The Ukrainian government did not report on the dead Ukrainian soldiers in Kharkiv. As of March 2016, 364 deaths have been reported across Ukraine, 81.3% caused by swine flu A, H1N1, the same strand that caused the world pandemic in 2009. There's multiple instances here of people in Ukraine dying from the biological weapons that were coming out of the Pentagon-funded labs in Ukraine. So again, I support the Ukrainian people. I'm not saying that they're bad. They're actually being harmed more than anybody, especially considering that the U.S. is building and funding these biolabs in their backyard where they're releasing things or causing deaths. Look, as I scroll through here you have she's mapped it. The cases where there's cholera cases in Ukraine and where they have the biolabs. And here you go again. Black & Veatch Special Project Corp was awarded. Now, this is the one that subcontracted to Metabiota. Remember that. So Black & Veatch Special Project Corp was awarded $198 million dollars in DTRA contracts to build and operate biolaboratories in Ukraine under 2 5-year contracts in 2008 and 2012, totaling $128.5 million, as well as in Germany, Azerbaijan, Qumran, Thailand, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Armenia. Metabiota has been awarded $18.4 million in federal contract under the program in Georgia and Ukraine. The U.S. company was also contracted to perform for the DTRA with the Ebola crisis, as we reviewed. Here's nothing about Soviet defector and anthrax. And it just keeps going. So, folks, look, it's been an hour and 10 minutes practically. I could keep going. I'll show you one more thing. Okay, I'll show you one thing. These are actual photographs. These are actual photographs of the outdoor field tests at the Dugway Proving Ground. So these are U.S. Army documents and photos that show the Pentagon has developed various dissemination methods for bioterrorism attacks, including by explosives. These are literally the reports from the U.S. military, the U.S. Army, for dissemination by explosives of a chemical or biological stimulant funded by our Pentagon. Okay, let's look at some pictures. Here's some photographs. That's the dissemination of contaminants for biological and chemical tests. This is a picture from the military of them testing how to disseminate biological weapons. There's another one. Look at that giant explosive. Now, for those of you that are listening on podcast, I apologize you can't watch this, but a giant explosive releasing black clouds of chemical agents into the air. Here you have a helicopter flying overhead, disseminating liquid, spraying out liquid. Here you have more machines disseminating powder, biological weapons powder. Here you have aerosol sprayers spraying. You think chemtrails are bad? So, anyway, folks, so this has been kind of a crazy episode. I'm going to be going over to Rise TV soon for the Q&A. So I'll give you the final kind of pitch on that if you want to support what I'm doing, I'm going to continue this. And look, there's a reason why I'm doing most of my content for free on Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube, as long as it's not stuff that YouTube and Facebook are going to censor. But I want this information to get out there. I want you to share this video as much as you can. I want to try to fight. This is an information war. And so I'm not just moving behind a paywall and saying, oh, sorry, folks, come see me, but you have to pay money. No, I'm trying to do the majority of my content in front of the paywall, even though I don't get monetized from YouTube anymore. I think I make maybe $300 a month from YouTube. Whereas a liberal content creator with my audience is probably making $30,000 a month. That's not an understatement. So they've made it impossible for us to survive off of that. So that's why we built Rise TV. Rise TV allows me to do this full time. So if you like the information I'm giving you and you want more of it, you want to support shortly, soon, within the next month or so, I plan on doing a daily show. That's my plan. We're building a team around it. I'm going to be doing this every single day. My goal is 2 hours, 5 days a week, in addition to doing more produced content for you folks. So we are ramping up. This is our mission. We believe that this is how we fight this war. We're trying to help expose people to the truth and help them get away from the harmful misinformation that's being perpetuated and spewed by the mainstream media and the corrupt politicians. So look, if you want to come over and join us for the Q&A, there's a little link in the description below for a free trial. Doesn't cost you anything. Come over, check it out. You can ask me questions. I'll stay on for another hour and a half if I need to. I think last Thursday, I answered 44 questions. It took me over an hour. I answered 44 questions. So if you want to come over, I appreciate it. But also, look, I understand that times are tough right now. Gas prices are $30 a gallon before we know it. And I know that some of you are financially struggling, and that's okay. That's why I'll continue to make free content for you and keep putting it out. And if you want to support, just share the video. Just share it to your friends that you think might like it and say, hey, check out this Man in America guy. He's got a great beard and he's a cool guy. He's pretty calm. So if you want to do that, fantastic. But if you can support and you want to join Rise TV, if you end up staying, it's $9.99 a month, so $10 a month. It's a couple of coffees if you want to end up staying. So I hope that this has been a great show for you. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Dom, you can go ahead and cut the streams for Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook, because now we're going to jump over to Rise TV only. But again, thank you so much, everyone that is tuned in. Thank you for all the work you've done. You are fantastic. You spread the content I do. You share what I'm doing with everybody, and I really, really appreciate it. And I am just going hard on this. I am dedicating myself and my wife, and we've got a team that we're assembling that we're just going to keep going on this, because especially as we enter into these next couple of years, the information is so critical. We have to get this information out. So that's all, folks. So Dom, just you can let me know on Telegram when we have these streams ended. And also, Dom, you've been collecting the questions for me. So if you're over on Rise TV and you have a question for me, just write question in your comment, and we'll put it into a big list and I'll get through them. Also, I see that Sarge and Chicken Coop Lady and Sue, thank you so much for the donations over there on Rise TV. I really, really appreciate that. Honestly, thank you so much for that. And let's go ahead. I'm excited for your questions. I love all my public folks, but I love my Rise TV family. I love them a lot. So, all right. So I'm jumping back over onto Rise TV. I'm going to get a drink of water really quick because I've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes and I could have another hour ahead of me. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in.